Oh, hi, Claire.
Hello. Hi, I've made it. Hello.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Yes, you too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So how are you doing today?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm doing my last bits of work before I finish for
Mm,
Christmas today, so that's a nice feeling.
yeah. Okay, I just set up this uh, streaming just a minute and we're gone. So okay. Uh, First of all, welcome to Miston Mountain Creative Residences chat today, and we are really grateful to have you in this program.
Thank you for
Uh,
inviting me. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, first of all, a huge congratulations because you won the first prize in the Gerard Rochford International Poetry Contest. And looking at the data, it was like there were entries from 741 countries sorry, 41 countries and 736 participants. Sorry about that. Uh, so, friends, welcome everyone. Whoever is watching this program, it will be in our recording later as well, and the Miston Mountain Facebook page, and later on YouTube as well. I would like to introduce Claire Askew, a brilliant poet, and Claire Askew's book include the Creative Writing Guide, Novelista, John Murray, 2020, the multi-award-winning novel, All the Hidden Truths, and 2 poetry collection from the Bloodex books. This Changes Things 2016 was shortlisted for numerous awards, including Edwin Morgan Poetry Award, and How to Burn a Woman is forthcoming in October 2021.
It's
So
out now.
Claire holds a PhD in creative writing from the University of Edinburgh and has a Scottish Book Trust Reading Champion, a J.C. Kesson Fellow, and a University of Edinburgh's Writer in Residence. And I just want to quote Dr. Wen Price's word with his kind permission. Over many days of reading, reflecting, and comparing, I came back time and again to this carefully paced and precisely observed poem. The excellent verb choices throughout, spilling their filaments, trawling its clocks, holding the feeling of continual process, change in a poignant tension with a looming stillness and finality of mortality and loss. The imagery is sometimes synesthetic, sometimes painterly, but never obtrusive. The expert one use of assonance and caesura was a real highlight for me and did much to elevate this quiet meditation on love and loss above the many other fine poems in the competition that dealt with similar themes, moving and delicate lyricism, and a worthy winner. Once again, very proud to read your poem. I was indeed, I was rereading it many times, So can you tell me something about yourself, Claire, like about your childhood and how was the world like at that time?
Yeah, so I grew up in the 90s, which feels like a long time ago now. And I had 2 incredibly supportive parents because I always wanted to be a writer. And as a little small child, I was always writing stories and writing poems. And my mom used to take me to the public library every single day before I was at school. When I was a really little child, I would be taken to the public library every day. And my dad worked in public relations. So he was a technical writer. He wrote, press releases and things. And so he instilled in me like a really strong sense of technical writing and getting grammar right and all that kind of thing. He's a real stickler. So I was given kind of the perfect combination of a love of stories and creativity from my mom, and then an attention to detail and editing and grammar and whatnot from my dad, which I think, you know, I'm incredibly grateful for. It seems to have turned into a good skill set for me.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, that poem that you wrote, that was the poem that one it was about your mom, isn't it? Swinging
Mhm.
garden around. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really nice to be able to. I mean, as soon as I saw the call out for the competition, I thought I have a poem that would fit for that. And I haven't written many poems about my mom, funnily enough, but during the first COVID lockdown, we walked together a lot, and that was kind of one of the few activities that helped me to feel sane while lockdown was happening and everything was so terrifying. So it was really nice to be able to have that poem recognized, because it's one that feels very close to my heart.
It might be quite personal. Can I ask you, like, how long did it take to compose that poem, and when did you finish? Okay, fine, this is it. I mean, there's no further editing. You know, it should go. So, what's the timeline? You know, just roughly.
It's a hard question. So I compose all my poems longhand in a notebook, and I usually write them out by hand maybe 4 or 5 times. And each time I tweak things and I take lines out and I put lines in, and it's all very kind of scribbly. And then I type them, and they change some more when they're on the screen, because it becomes easier to move things around and delete things and whatnot. But it's quite a slow process. And I wrote that poem, I mean, it's in August, so I think I must have written it in August 2020. And then it was finished maybe a couple of months later. But there's always that feeling of, I think it was Paul Valery said that a poem is never finished, it's only abandoned. And I really feel like that. I get to a point where I think I just have to stop picking at it. But I always feel like I could pick at a poem forever if I was allowed. And like, I look at my published books and I look at the poems in them and I think, I wish I'd just moved that one comma, or I wish I'd just done something, you know, it never stops. The desire to edit kind of never stops, I don't think. Not for me anyway.
Yeah. So again, I know I just don't want to go away from that poem. While writing, did you visit the garden? Was the garden was it the garden at your home, or your backyard that you're talking about? Did you revisit the garden while writing?
It's funny. It's actually it's a garden of a neighbour of my parents. So my mom and I would walk around the village, which is kind of a village of gardens. Like, all the houses have really, really nice manicured gardens and gnomes and things. It's quite a strange sort of suburban place. And there's this one garden where there is a rosemary bush. We would go past it every day. And every day we would reach out and touch the rosemary bush so that we could smell, you know, because it releases the smell. And so it's the garden of somebody that I don't know. And I kind of always imagine this person looking out of their window and seeing me and my mom like coming up to the rosemary bush and thinking that we were a little bit mad. But yeah, every time, still when I walk that way, which I do quite a lot, I still go and touch the rosemary bush. So it had to go in the poem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. What influenced you to write? When did you first think that, oh, I need to become a poet or a writer? When did
that? I had a really good English teacher in school. I think that's something that a lot of writers say, is they had an influential teacher who kind of gave them permission. And my English teacher was Miss Barker, who, when I was about 14, she taught us the poem Iolaire, or possibly Iolari, by Ian Crichton Smith, which is a really kind of dark, gnarly poem about a maritime disaster. And it shows people drowning and drowned bodies washing up on the shore, and it's from the point of view of a minister who goes down to the sea to try and help, and he just feels completely helpless and kind of questions his faith in the face of such a kind of senseless event. And for 14 years, I mean, most of my classmates were like, what is this that we're being made to read? This is so weird and depressing, and why do we have to read this? And yet it sort of blew my mind a little bit, that I was like, oh, poetry can be about anything. Poetry can be about something difficult or something scary or something horrible. It doesn't have to be just nice things. You can literally write poetry about anything. And her teaching that poem to me at that age, I think I was just the right impressionable age to have my eyes opened. So Miss Barker and Ian Crichton-Smith were big influences on me.
Yeah, they must be really proud to hear that. Going back to the Gerard Rochford Poetry Prize, how did you feel about it? Like, what do you think so this prize is, and what thoughts did you have about when you won that?
I mean, obviously, I feel incredibly privileged to have been chosen out of so many entries. I couldn't believe it when I heard that there had been over 700 entries, which is truly gobsmacking, and great that so many poets engaged with this prize and wanted to send their work. It's funny because I feel like I don't write prize-winning kind of poems. I read poems that win prizes and I think these are about sort of big, important topics. And I've written this kind of quiet little poem about walking around the village with my mum. And so it was really nice to have this kind of quiet poem, to have it speak up loud enough that Wayne Price could hear it and could recognize what I was trying to do with it. So that was great. And also I think the prize has a wonderful ethos as well. It's really nice to be part of a prize that looks to someone's legacy and kind of looks to pass on that legacy. So yeah, I feel really privileged to have won, definitely.
Yeah, one of the interesting thing we noticed, as organizers, was it was quite diverse. There were entries from Namibia, Zambia, right to Europe and through North America. So the diversity was quite interesting, and since it was organized by residents in Scotland, so that was something so it was quite nice. We noticed. One of the kind of I was going through some of the interviews, and was it true that one of your ancestors was burnt on a stake or something?
Yes, yes.
Just for being a poet.
Yes, so I can tell you about her if you would like.
Yeah,
there are a few poems in.
The audience would be fascinated too.
How to Burn a Woman.
Yeah, just for the viewers, like we are thinking. I mean, we're thinking of giving away 5 copies of Claire's new book randomly to our viewers later on. So please, let's see. Yeah, please.
Okay. It looks like this.
Yeah.
And it's partly called How to Burn a Woman because it has poems in it about Anne Askew. So Anne Askew was born in 1521. She was the younger sister of a woman named Martha Askew, who was betrothed to a very fancy nobleman, but her sister died. And so her father was like, my other daughter is dead, but here is my 15-year-old who we'll just replace her, basically. So Anne ended up in this forced marriage to a man that she really couldn't stand. And it made her very kind of militant. So she tried to file for a divorce. She was one of the first women in Britain ever to file for a divorce. It didn't work, but she tried. And, in the mid 1500s, during the start of the Reformation, she was very brave to do that. She was also a political protester. So she went to Lincoln Cathedral and sat there for 6 days, I think, and read the Bible, which women weren't allowed to do at the time. So she was protesting for kind of greater women's rights. And she was also a poet. And she was one of the first women to write poetry that wasn't religious, so to write secular poetry in the English language. And of course, because she did all these things, she was seen as a huge troublemaker. And eventually she was tried at the Tower of London, and she was actually tortured. She was one of only 2 women to ever be tortured at the Tower of London. And then she was burned at the stake. That was her sentencing, because she didn't give up any information under torture. So they executed her, and she was only 25. So it was 1546 when she died. So obviously she had this horrendous thing happen to her, but at the same time, she is, to me, an incredibly inspiring person. And I thought, I feel like I have to write about her and keep her story going. And during 2020, we'd always had this family story that we were related to her, but we'd never found a link. And then in 2020, during lockdown, my mom decided to spend the time getting really involved in the family tree and doing genealogy. And she finally found the link. So we now know for sure that Anne Askew was my 13 times great aunt, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. Was that particular point in history that you were quite? I also saw that you're interested in witches, and you write a lot about them. Do you believe in witches, or have you experienced any form of witchery?
Well, this is really interesting. So the witches that I write about in this book were obviously not really witches. They were people who behaved in ways that were kind of different. And so at the time, we're talking like 1550 to 1650 mostly, and a little bit further on than that. But at the time, everyone was extremely superstitious. Everyone believed in witchcraft. Everyone believed that you could be possessed by the devil, or, bad things could happen to you through magic. And so these were people who didn't actually do magic, but they were a bit weird, or their neighbors didn't like them, or they got into arguments in the village or whatever, and they ended up on trial for witchcraft, and most of them ended up being executed. So it was kind of a terrifying time to be alive, and definitely a terrifying time to be different from other people. So I was really interested in writing about the kind of individual stories of some of these people, to figure out what it was about them that made them stand out and made them kind of be picked off in that way. In terms of my experience, I do identify as a witch. I've got my little moon on. There's even a sign behind me that says kitchen witch. So I do identify with a kind of pagan kind of ideology, but it's very, very different to what was going on in the 15 and 1600s, obviously. Completely different thing. So with me, it's just it's almost a way of being more part of the natural world, and kind of observing things like the solstices and the equinoxes and the seasons, and just trying to be a bit more involved with the world, which I think in these times of mass technology and climate change and things, it's quite a good thing for us all to do. I basically want everyone to become a witch. My eventual goal.
No, I love the sentence when you say that it's a terrifying time to be different. Even now, it's you have to pay a lot of price to be different, isn't it? So can you share your writing journey? Like, have you done anything as a creative practitioner? Have you done anything wild in order to write? Like something out of the box.
I've done a lot of strange residencies. That's probably the weirdest thing I've done. I really like a good wild remote residency, and I think it's really useful for certainly my creative practice to go and be completely alone. So you mentioned in my little bio at the beginning the Jessie Kesson Fellowship. Mm-hmm. So with that fellowship, you go and spend a month in a little cottage in the Ben Wyvis mountain range in Scotland. It's nearish Inverness, but it's very in the middle of nowhere. And there's not very good phone signal and there's not very good Wi-Fi, and you're completely on your own for a month. And I was there in March, so it was snowing, and a lot of the time I couldn't get out of I couldn't get my car up the hill to get out. So being very alone was not really an option. I had to do it, and it really helped. I actually wrote a lot of this collection while I was there. And then I've also done a residency at the Curfew Tower, which is in Northern Ireland in a village called Cushendall. And it's like a guard tower in the middle of the village with a dungeon in the basement, wow. Which is where they used to put people if they were outside after the curfew. So it was kind of like the village drunk tank, basically. If you left the pub and didn't go home straight away, they would come and put you in the dungeon for the night. And the tower is the rest of the tower is turned into accommodation, but it's very basic. So there's no central heating and there's no shower and there's no washing machine. There's one fire on one floor and that's it. So I went and stayed there for a month as well, and also felt a little bit like I was going mad, but in a very good way. And I used that residency to write my second novel, because I also write novels. So that's not especially weird, but I do think that like alone time and like extreme alone time has been very important for my writing process.
So at one, let's say in one session, do you go for, how many days usually do you go for, like 2-3 or a week or a month?
I mean, most residencies that are offered by writing centres or those kinds of places are a week, which is good, but the ideal, I think, is a month, because you really feel like you can properly get rid of all of your distractions and you can stop thinking about what's at home and, oh, when I get home, I have to do this and I have to, and you can put your email out of office on and be like, I'm gone for a month, don't contact me. And a month really feels like a time that you can get meaningful work done. Mm-hmm. I know some people, I'm not one of them, but I know some people who could probably write a novel in a month. Come across, but I would love to meet them. I don't understand that myself, but some people apparently can do that. But yeah, you need a good big chunk of time if it's possible. But obviously, it's a huge privilege to be able to do that. So I've been very lucky.
So I'm focusing more on your residency. Is there a particular routine that you follow when you're in residency, or you just let go whatever the time gives you, or the evening, like?
So I have a friend who's a novelist whose name is Natalie Fergie, and she has a really good writing routine that I have basically stolen. So she writes in what she calls sprints of 90 minutes at a time, so an hour and a half. And she usually will do 3 or sometimes 4 in a day. And in 90 minutes, you can do a really good sizable chunk of work, but it's not such a long time that you kind of start to procrastinate. You kind of start to think, oh, I've been doing this for ages. I'm just going to go on Facebook, or I'm just going to go on Twitter or whatever. And I had never used this system before, but just recently I have started doing these 90-minute sprints. And it makes a huge difference. It's made me a lot more productive. So I highly recommend that. I don't know if Natalie wants it to stay a trade secret, but I've just blown it if she does.
You're a creative writing tutor, and you have done numerous sessions in schools and colleges. And now it's easy for one to write, but I don't mean to say it's easy, but how do you inspire others to write? That's more important, I think. And how do you do? Is there any particular, let's say, mantra that you have, or any courses?
I mean, again, I think try and take inspiration from what happened to me in school with Miss Barker, showing me something that kind of completely changed what I thought writing was. Most of the teaching that I have done has been poetry rather than fiction, although I do teach fiction as well. And a lot of the time when you go into schools, especially, kids have a very strong idea of what they think poetry is. They decide very young that poetry is difficult and it's boring and it's for grown-ups and it's about stuff that they don't care about and it's not about their lives and it has no relevance to them. And so then if you can show them something that makes them go, oh yeah, I actually quite like that, and that speaks to me about something in my life that if you can kind of nonplus them almost, that helps. There's often it's not so much about their ability to write, because everyone can have ideas and write them down. It's more about getting past those barriers that they've put up, which are usually preconceptions about creative writing based on things they've had to do in school for exam purposes. And when they learn that they can just kind of play and enjoy themselves, and also that they are allowed to write about the things from their lives, that makes a big difference. I ran a project at Craigroyston High School in Edinburgh with some young men who were about S3, so they're like 15, and they were really shocked to discover that they were allowed to write about hearts and hibs football teams. They were allowed to write about football, and once they realised that, they were like, oh, great, we can do this, and they wrote really good.
Now, as when you talk about inspiration, you say that you go to the residency to write, but within a 24 hours, let's say within a day-to-day routine, do you inculcate any activities or hobbies that inspires the writing? Like going out for a walk, or seeing the sunset, or is there anything that you look forward to in a day?
Yeah, walking is a big thing. I feel like, especially if I've been writing and I feel like I've hit a wall, if I've got blocked, oftentimes if I just go out for a walk, my brain starts going, oh, I could do this, I could make this happen, I could write this scene, I could do this bit of dialogue. And something about the movement unblocks my brain. So walking is really good. And also people watching and eavesdropping. I'm a big fan of eavesdropping, which might be an immoral thing, but I think it's a victimless crime, so it's fine. I really like being on a bus, and I have really missed going on buses during COVID because, for a lot of the time it wasn't a good idea if you didn't have to travel. So I haven't been on buses very much at all in the past 2 years. But buses are such good places to overhear conversations and to see people having really interesting little interactions and pick up snippets that then become a poem or a story. So I used to do a lot of riding on buses, and I hope to go back to that soon when we're all released from Omicron, hopefully.
Yeah. For a young upstart or practicing poets or writers from the younger generation, what a piece of advice would you give them, if there's anything?
The thing I always say is you have to believe that you deserve to do this thing. You have to believe that you're allowed to, and that what you're writing is important. Because I meet a lot of aspiring writers who really want to do it, but they feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. Nobody's interested in what I have to say. Why should anyone pay attention to me? They have very low self-esteem around their writing. And until you get to a point where you're working with a publisher or you have an agent or whatever, it's just you're the only person who's going to champion your work. And if you're at the poetry reading sitting at the back going, nobody's going to listen to me, then your work is never going to get out there. So you have to believe that you deserve it. And I also encourage people to remember that nobody can tell the story you want to tell the way you can. So there are a lot of people, I meet a lot of people who also say to me, well, so much writing already exists and there are already so many poems out there and so many stories out there. What can I add? And the answer is that you can add your voice, because your voice is different to anybody else's. And even if you're telling, we've seen many retellings of, for example, Frankenstein. There's been tons of different retellings of that same story. But they're all different because they're all given to us by different writers. Jeanette Winterson just did a Frankenstein version, and it's very, very different to the original, So it's important to remember that your voice is unique. And so you will always add something new, no matter what.
Can you share something about a forthcoming work or whatever you're doing right now, whatever it is, whether it's fiction or poetry?
Yeah, so with poetry, I'm a little bit quiet now because this just came out a month and a half ago. So poetry, I've done that, and now I'm putting poetry down for a little while. I have a fourth novel coming out in March, which is called A Matter of Time. I write crime fiction, and A Matter of Time is about a hostage negotiation. It takes place across 24 hours, and it's an untrained police officer who has to go into a hostage situation and try and negotiate everyone's safe return to the world, essentially. So it's very kind of thrillery and very tense. It's called A Matter of Time. Please pre-order it. I'm very excited for it. And then at the moment, I am just finishing novel number 5. So I have about 5,000 words left to write. And my deadline is the 1st of January. So if I look drawn and tired, that's because I've been working away towards my deadline. So fiction is my main focus at the moment, but I hope to get back to poetry soon because it's my first love and I miss it a lot.
Okay, so it's a matter of time, is it?
Yes.
Okay. We've got a lot of followers, throughout the whole world. Can you share something with the audience? Is there anything you particularly like to share with the audience?
I mean, I wondered if you would like me to read some poems, maybe?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, please.
That's probably the best thing I can share, I imagine. I might read one about Anne Askew, since I've mentioned Anne Askew. There are a few in here that are inspired by her. But this one is sort of the story of her final days. And it is just called Anne Askew died 1546. You lived for a month in the White Tower, saying nothing in the cross-examination, saying nothing as the men came in, went out, as they swung the various instruments of their work, whistled in the passageways. It was June, and in the garden by the tower where the ladies walked, the honeysuckle pushed its ragged blooms out of the wall like hands. They showed you the rack, told you how they'd pop your hips and shoulders from the sockets, dislocate your elbows and knees. You didn't speak, but climbed the device's side and lay your ankles in the straps. A man once told me, every human being gets 2 deaths. The second one is the last time someone living says or writes your name. Anne, it's been 570 years since they lifted you down. Your secrets still wound in the cord of your throat, the women whose locations you withheld awake and listening from their beds. I am weak, but Anne, I will keep committing your name as if it's a crime, so the distant children's children of those men whose second deaths came long ago will know you when you're spoken of. They'll know that you were 25, that you were told you would be burned. They'll know that as you waited in your cell, and though it punished every nerve, you took up your pen, you wrote it all down.
Wow. Yeah, some of the very moving images, the honeysuckle pushing through and 2 deaths. Yeah.
Yeah, the 2 deaths idea comes from a book that I recommend to everybody. It's a really brilliant book called Some. It's written by S-U-M, Some like a maths, Some. It's written by a neuroscientist called David Eagleman. And he did the slightly strange project of deciding to write 50 different imagined ideas of what the afterlife might be.
Wow.
just as a kind of, he was interested in these ideas. And one of them is that you die once and then you die again the last time someone says your name. And I thought that was such a powerful idea that I kind of stole it. But it is in the notes. So I have credited him. And I do tell everyone to buy that book because it's great. It's a good Christmas present if anyone's still looking for a Christmas present.
Maybe I just wanted to share to the audience that we are giving away 5 books of Claire Askew. So just write down a comment or anything, then we'll see the first 5 comments and we'll just post that books to you. Again, as we're talking, I think there's a time for poetry in the end. So do you, as a writer, do you believe in afterlife? Or because since we're talking about that, that's very no.
I'm very interested in this. I'm very, very interested in ideas about the afterlife. My first book, which is called This Changes Things, my first book of poetry, has a lot of ghosts in it. I'm very interested in the idea of how our loved ones especially kind of stick around, even if it's only in our memories or in us seeing kind of synchronicity in the world, like, hearing your grandmother's favorite song on the radio and feeling like she's visited you. I'm really interested in those kinds of things, how we sort of think about legacy after someone has died. But I'm also very interested in accounts of things like near-death experiences and people who think they've seen ghosts and people who think they've astral projected. I don't know how much I believe in them. I'm very interested in them. They're the kind of things that I could read about all day. And I will always watch these programs about like paranormal experiences. There used to be a program called Most Haunted. I don't know if anyone remembers it, where people would go into supposedly haunted buildings and get very scared and hear noises and things. I love that sort of stuff. And I think it influences my writing quite a lot, that kind of spooky, paranormal stuff, but also kind of underneath it, what it represents, which I think is a desire to stay in touch with the past and to feel like our loved ones' lives were not just in vain, that they have a legacy and they kind of carry on through us. So yeah, I think it's, for all that it's a lot of it's very silly, the idea about talking to ghosts or having ghosts visit you or whatever, or there being a kind of afterlife where everyone who's died is still floating around somehow. For all that that's quite silly, I think it speaks to quite a deep thing in us as people. So I'm interested in that.
Yeah. Talking about, as a poet also, I also do a lot of residency, and I especially like to blend, wild camping with poetry writing. And while going out into the wild, especially if you're going on a solo, I don't know if you have been, what mostly you like is the open space, especially the moon and the stars at night, and suddenly there's a challenge that there's a jungle out there, so but you get fascinated by that, So have you ever experienced such type of solitude, in the woods or in the wilderness? And
I have only been wild camping once. I do like to camp, but I usually stay in campsites. But I did go wild camping once in Canada, and I stayed on an island called Sydney Island, which is it called Sydney Island? It's called Sydney Spit, I think, which is off Sydney in British Columbia, which is, by the way, Canada's book town. It's a great place. It has more bookshops per head capita than anywhere else in Canada. It's amazing. So I went and stayed on Sydney Spit, which is an uninhabited island, and it's a nature reserve. And because it was the summer, I just slept out. I didn't have a tent. I was just kind of on a mat in the in the middle of a kind of prairie. And I was woken up in the middle of the night by a bull elk putting his nose on my face like this, like snuffling me. And he was absolutely huge. He was the size of a truck and he had these huge antlers. And he's just kind of snuffling my face, like obviously trying to figure out what is this creature. And I was terrified, but it was probably also the most kind of transcendent moment I've ever had in my life, to just be another creature that this massive creature was kind of saying hello to. And then he figured out that I wasn't anything interesting, that like he couldn't eat me and I wasn't going to eat him, so he just wandered off. But it was completely amazing. And I think you're right that only when you go out into the wild world can you have those truly kind of experiences that make you feel very dwarfed, I think, and very small and humble. So I would like to do more wild camping and hope that I meet more elk, etc.
I saw some of your interviews available in the YouTube, and one that struck me was your fascination for old typewriters. You have a collection of typewriters. Do you still?
I do. Yeah. I have slimmed it down a bit because I've moved. The house that I'm sitting in now is very small. So I've moved to a much smaller house than I used to live in, and I had to let go of some of my typewriters. But at its biggest, my collection was about 35, which was ridiculous. I now have about 9 or so of my favorites that I kept. But yes, that's one of my strange affectations. I just think they're really fascinating. I like the idea that they all have stories that have been written on them, and they've, a lot of the time they've belonged to lots of people, because they're these kind of big, durable machines that people pass down and give to their children, and they go in a loft or whatever. And I'm just really interested in the idea that all sorts of things could have been written on these typewriters, and I'm using the same technology that writers have been using for a really long time.
Mm-hmm. So you're fascinated by the sound and the idea that anything could have been written. We've got some comments from, I think there's from Sarita Sharma from India. It is difficult to be different. Always great conversation here. And there's Harish Rana again from Shimla. He says great video. So that's the conversation. That's the comments we have got. Moving along now, maybe if we can read. Is it time for poems? Maybe a few poems. Then,
yeah. So I thought I would read. Hang on, my sound's a bit strange. I don't know if that's any better.
Yeah, it's okay.
It does my sound. I sound a bit garbled at this end. Am I okay at that end?
You're okay.
That's fine. So I thought I would read Weatherly, which is the poem that won the Poetry Prize. Since we've talked about it quite a lot, I thought I would read it so everyone can hear it.
Yeah, that's one.
Weatherall. We're walking the village with August turning brown, bulbs of honeysuckle spilling their filaments, summer's fairy lights clawed from trees. My mother's giving me a garden tour, naming the known plants, closing her hand around rosemary to wear its bangle of smell. She looks small, ducking under buddleia, shrunk somehow in its violet black light, as we wonder aloud if the butterflies are dead, the quiet thistles lit, bird's nest kicked out of the hedges. I don't get these gardens, their fed lawns with beds of hydrangea, pansies the colour of headache, sun-faded gnomes. Like poems, shouldn't what's grown be visible? Beyond the ditch, the wind combs the dock, there's chickweed living root, the toll path dandelion trolling its flocks, though it was round-upped only weeks ago. My mother opens her hand so I can smell her ghost of rosemary. It's gone, like the best of this long year, but I don't say. Let her put her hand to my face, so later, when everything begins to die, I can remember a garden did grow here once, and my mother loved it, enough to bring me here, enough to teach me all its names. That's what.
Every time I read a poem, I get goosebumps.
Oh.
Especially reading directly from I just get goosebumps. It's what a wonderful accomplishment. You see, turning brown bulbs of honeysuckle, closing hands around rosemary, birds' nest kicked out of the hedges. How did you get such a,
It's really interesting to me that I've just noticed that poem and the Anne Askew poem both had honeysuckle. I hadn't noticed that before. So obviously I'm interested in honeysuckle, which I am, I guess. Honeysuckle is such a weird shaped flower. It has these kind of little fingers. And I think I'm fascinated by that. But I hadn't noticed that it's in both poems until right then.
A pansy is the color of headache.
It's those, you can get those, I don't know, I mean, people are listening all over the world, so they might not know what I'm talking about, but in the United Kingdom, there are lots of garden centres that sell little bedding plants that have been kind of dyed, or I think they've been dyed because they're such unnatural colours. They're kind of so pink that it almost is painful to look at them, or they're so yellow. And I'm just really interested in people who choose to have these like loud plants in their gardens. So
yeah, maybe a few more poems.
So I mentioned that I write about ghosts a bit, so I thought I would do a ghost kind of poem. So this book, as well as having stories of real historical people who were accused of witchcraft, also has poems that are kind of in the form of spells. So they're sort of instructions for performing a kind of mundane spell, if that makes sense. And this one is called A Spell for Preparing to Sleep Alone in an Unfamiliar House. Open every window. Look out on the darkening garden, the holly tree fistful with berries, everything black and lilac. Look at the long grass rising. Listen. Count all the ways you're not alone, not really. The breeze spraying aerosol clouds on the moon's garage wall, small movements in the hedge, clock of gutters, spent stuff blown into corners, corpses in the patio door's old webs. Check the shed, its padlock the colour of pennies. Check under the beds, obviously check under the beds. Push a stick elbow deep into wardrobes of overcoats, the rhombus of space behind each door. Houses warp and sigh in the night's grip, a thing you'll learn. As a girl, when I'd ask, what was that noise? My grandmother would say, something changing its mind. Mind the lintels and jambs, the in-between rooms, each screw and peg a marker in this house's map. Remember, its ghosts are lonely, its stove a mouth sewn shut, gulls yelling down the flue. Let out whatever wants to go. Be sure whatever stays has chosen to.
Wow, that's another wonderful accomplishment here.
Again, I wanted, that poem came out of that little phrase that my grandmother used to say. If I would get scared as a child and be like, what was that noise? She's like, oh, it's just something changing its mind. The idea that the house is just changing its mind about something. I thought that was, as a child, I was so perplexed and interested in that idea. It's something changing its mind, and the idea that things in the house had minds of their own and opinions. I really like that. So that was the little, little central kernel.
And I also love that, screws and did you say the markers in the map of a house, you know?
Mhm.
So what we're nearly there. Maybe we'll have a few more questions and one point to finish with.
Yeah.
Do you have one more? Or?
I can do one more poem, yeah. Let me just
Yeah, then we can.
let me see what I can find. Maybe I should do one of the ones about a person who was accused of witchcraft, if I can find one. Who will I do? I think I'll do Eunice Cole. I really like Eunice Cole. So Eunice Cole was a woman who lived in Massachusetts. I think it was Massachusetts in the New World, in the colonies in America. And she is one of the few people I write about who wasn't actually executed for witchcraft, but she was arrested many, many times, and she spent a lot of time in jail. And when she died, the people of the town were still so afraid of her that they buried her outside the walls of the town with a stake through her heart, like a vampire, so she couldn't come back. And I think that's kind of, I mean, obviously her story is very tragic, but I think the idea of just inspiring that kind of fear in your neighbors, there's something quite badass about that. So I'll read Eunice Cole, died 1680. I was tired of the cart track the cattle were driven down, tired of their spattered white bodies passing like clouds. The ones that trailed the pack were whipped with sticks because that's what happens to stragglers. I was tired of living to see so many grass-fed boys grow like their fathers. Every year it was February that almost killed me. All that winter's patch-up jobs undone by weather, dead things in the root store. I was tired of the cherry in the windy garden, its hard little buds. I was tired of the stone in my dark red flesh. I counted every cobble in the floor of their jail. I slept on straw like the whipped grey calf that never grew right. I dreamed about the gallows rope holding its blue teardrop of night. I was tired of little girls being told not to come down my road. They planted me beyond the walls. In summer, the lords and ladies push up their executioners' hoods. The mushrooms on my choked grave are dark as boils. Everything rots with time. Even my stake, my famous stake, even my famous heart. That's Eunice.
So just read a few messages over here. Umis Acharya, he's from the United States, says, enjoying the conversation. And I think we have another great poet who was also one of the runners-up, Owen Gallagher.
Oh, yeah.
A wonderful interview and readings. Rudraksha Joshi from Nepal said, hello, how are you? And Tak Thapa says, great stuff. So now I think we are almost there. Yeah. Do you have any, again, I think I've said that before. Do you have any message for the viewers of Miston Mountain? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Let me think. Oh, I feel like there's people all over the world watching and I have a chance to give a message to everybody, which is pressure. Do you know what? I think I'm going to say, if you have near you a library, please go and support your library, because we are living in times where, certainly in the United Kingdom, and I know in a lot of other places as well, libraries are really under threat. And COVID has been very bad for libraries because people haven't been able to go to them so much and they're really struggling. And I know that just having more people sign up for a library card, even if you don't go to the library, if you go and sign up for a library card, that helps them to advocate for their own future and say, look, we are a service that's needed. And they really are a service that's needed. I have worked in libraries myself in the past, and they're an incredibly useful community asset. So my message to everybody is please go to your local library and say hello to a librarian and borrow a book if you want one, or just sign up for a library card, or just even just walking in the door. They count the number of people who come every year. So even just going and walking in makes a difference, because they're able to say, look, this many people came, this many people want us to exist. So go and hug a librarian, or maybe not because of COVID. Go and wave at a librarian.
So that was something very, I think that was a great message, because it's not only library, I think, bookshops, independent bookshops as well. I'm quite concerned sometimes when I see these bookshops getting closed, because of giant companies like Amazon or something. So one before going, and as I've said that Mission Mountain Residency will purchase 5 books, and it'll be given away the name of the the book on our website as well, and then Facebook. So can I read the name? Is that could you read the name of the book, please? Yes.
The book is called How to Burn a Woman.
Yeah, How to Burn a Woman. Okay, so is that the latest release? That is it?
This is the newest one. Yeah.
Mhm.
I should have my others to wave, but I don't have them. I'm sorry, I don't have them with me.
Yeah, and okay, this is perhaps the last question that I'll be asking. It's quite strange in its own way, but I just thought that as a poet writer, I don't know, you might have come across. When we think someday the people whom we love, the hearts that we love, or our near and dear ones all go, they all die, even us, like, have you come across any thought, and have you, okay, I'll write about this. Have you, the ones around you right now and the near and those all die. Have you come across, as a writer, have you come across that thought, and have you written anything? Or
I mean, I haven't written, it's a thing I think about, as I say, because I'm interested in the idea of afterlife and the paranormal, and I like to think that my grandmother, especially, who I mentioned in that poem, I still feel like she's very with me a lot of the time. She was a very stern woman. And sometimes I will be doing things and I will hear her voice in my head going, what are you doing? Just being like, what are you doing, young lady? But that's kind of nice, because it feels like she's still with me, and it's definitely her, because it sounds just like her. I have not yet tackled that particular, I mean, I write a lot about family and a lot about family members who have died, especially in This Changes Things, which was my first poetry book. But I can recommend a poetry book by another poet that I think deals with that topic amazingly. And that book is What the Living Do by Marie Howe, which is about, really, it's about the death of her brother, who died from AIDS in the 90s. But it's also just an amazing rumination on death and how we deal with death. And the title poem, What the Living Do, is one of the greatest poems I've ever read. And she talks about how weird it is if you just stop and think about being alive, and what a strange and amazing and mundane and brilliant gift it is to be alive and to be walking around. And she ruminates on it in a way that I've never come across before, but it's absolutely incredible. So What the Living Do by Marie Howe. That's a book that I wish I'd written, but would never have the skill.
to repeat the name of the author?
Marie Howe. So Howe is how you spell her last
name. Thank you very much for your wonderful insight. And I'll just read the final few comments. So we've got Y Sharma from Australia. Good conversation, really beautiful. Enjoying her poems. So thank you, Claire, for being our guest today, and we'd love to have you in Aberdeen, in person. You are a wonderful poet and a wonderful human being, and each poem is very moving, very, very detailed, and I'd love to read your book soon. And as soon as we finish this, we'll order books from you and we'll give it to our 5 viewers as well. And is there any last few things you'd like to say, or
I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who's commented and everyone who's watching. It's really nice to hear the comments and hear that people are enjoying it. And it's so great to hear there are people all over the world. I mean, in Australia, it must be, I don't even know, the middle of the night right now, right? So it's great that people are watching and have enjoyed this. So thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. It's been great.
Thanks, Leah. Just a small reminder to our viewers. On the 22nd of January, we are inviting Dr. Wen Prize in Aberdeen as well. So if anybody's around Aberdeen, you can book your place through Mist and Mountain website or through Mist and Mountain's Facebook. Again, thanks a lot for being here. We completely enjoyed this, and thanks to all the viewers around the world for being with us. Have a good day, Claire.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Bye.